Valley Live presents Path to the Show with Prospects Live.
Welcome into Path to the Show on Valley Live and Stadium. We are the Prospects Live crew, and today we'll be breaking down the top 10 prospects in the Tampa Bay Rays farm system. With me today is one of my amazing fantasy cohorts at Prospects Live is Drew Wheeler, and at Prospects Live we look to combine every platform of minor league baseball and Major League Baseball to give our Patreon members the most comprehensive understanding of the minor leagues that we possibly can through data, live looks, and just general baseball content. How are you doing today, Drew?
Doing well, Reese. I'm glad to be with you as always here on Path to the Show to talk about a system whose prospects are always at the top of the fantasy rankings for better or worse, the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, the Rays always seem to have a really loaded farm system. I don't think they have the top five guy like they normally do, but they also have just an amazing amount of talent. I mean, a lot of that came to them by way of the trade deadline and also just some of their, their great scouting and everything. They're one of the best scouting organizations in baseball. They scout their own farm system better than anybody else. They scout other people's farm systems better than anybody else. And I've had someone with a team tell me that when the Rays make a trade, or they call you about a prospect, you should probably reevaluate what you think of that prospect. So, and it's ultimately like that Sam Miller tweet that you see every once in a while. Who did the Rays get? I love this for the Rays. So, kind of things didn't go great for the Rays major league team. It's kind of towards the back end of a competitive window for them, where they have to trade off some of their guys. They traded off Isaac Paredes for Christopher Morel. They ended the season 80 and 82. Fourth in the American League East, and they didn't make the postseason for the first time. It feels like a while. I mean, we didn't get a chance to see that postseason graphic of their entire bullpen and their arm slots all around a clock. So, I kind of missed that on my end. But what did you think about the Rays season?
It's upsetting for sure. Well, I say upsetting. 80 and 82, hardly a bad season, just barely below 500, but fourth in the AL East. So it's a buzzsaw out there. And the Rays did kind of have some bum luck. Shane McClanahan missed the entire season. He's one of the best pitchers in fantasy and in baseball when he's healthy. I don't know. They trade away their one all-star, Isaac Paredes. Um, I don't know, man. It was a bizarre season, especially when you consider this team made the World Series very recently. It has to be upsetting for all 48 of the Rays fans.
Yeah, I think things for them didn't go the way they wanted to, and they kind of quickly pivoted. They were even in the postseason, like they weren't 100% eliminated in like the final week of the season. They went to the Tigers, and if they would have won that series and won out, they could have made it to the postseason. But ultimately, they
Yeah.
didn't. So, I mean, they did trade Isaac Paredes in what was a weird deal for everybody involved because Paredes is a
Yeah.
lift and pull hitter who kind of benefited from Tampa's ballpark, and now he's in Chicago, where it's kind of up in the air. I mean, there's even some rumblings that they might get traded this offseason for Morel, who is a good but flawed player. He's good at hitting the ball really hard. He's really fast. He just struggles in the field and he struggles to make contact, which makes him kind of an interesting profile. Plus, they got Hunter Biggie, who we're not going to be discussing too much this episode, but that dude is going to be that's like closer level stuff. What do you think that they do this offseason though?
This offseason, I think what they will do and what they need to do are going to be very different things. I think the Rays could honestly get some stopgap guys, a couple of veterans on 1 or 2 year deals. As a matter of fact, Reese, something I'll address multiple times through this episode is one of the projects that the fantasy team is working on in terms of dynasty leagues is looking at what every team's lineup and pitching rotation could look like in 2027. Christopher Morel, part of that, and Hunter Biggie, part of that. I think a couple of guys might be signed to some short term deals. Honestly, I think some trades might help just to open up some doors for some of the younger guys who could spark and be part of the new Rays renaissance, so to say. Some guys we're going to talk about very, very soon.
Yeah, there could be some major shakeups coming. I mean, they have to figure out like what's going on with the stadium in 2026. It got announced recently
Mm,
that they're going to go play at Hal Steinbrenner Field or Steinbrenner Field, sorry, not Hal. Steinbrenner Field, the Yankees complex in Florida for their spring training. So they're going to play there all season. They have to figure out, are they going to be in Tampa where they're going to move? It's a difficult situation for them because the hurricane ultimately destroyed their roof, like most of it, like 80% of the roof is gone. So ultimately, we have to figure out how that sort of impacts them. It will obviously impact their bottom line. It'll impact a lot of different things for them. I mean, they technically made an offer to Juan Soto, but they're also the kings of sending an offer to a free agent without it being disrespectful, but also not in the realm of being considered. And, we were talking about some of their young prospects and everything like that. And they're going to be coming up through the system, which has some iconic like logos and things. You have AAA, the Durham Bulls. I mean, the Montgomery Biscuits is one of my personal favorites, a double A squad, the Bowling Green Hot Rods, the Charleston River Dogs, and their Florida Complex and their Dominican Complex League affiliates. And they kind of, they always have a loaded farm system. I mean, really, in this episode, we really could have gone 15, 20 deep, but we're sticking to the top 10, and it's a really loaded farm system. Who of the top 10 that we are not going to be talking about too much? Give me a quick thought on an honorable mention.
Honorable mention right off the top has got to be Gary Gilhill, a starting pitcher who did pretty much everything you could expect or want for a young starting pitcher to do in 2024. I might have shifted some names around if it were up to me, but this is a team effort and I can't be selfish. But Gary Gilhill, circle, highlight, and put a star on his name in your fantasy leagues. What about you, Reese?
I love Gary Gill. That's a great shout. I'm going to go with one of the rare catching prospects they have in the system, in Dominic Keegan. Dominic Keegan is a Vandy boy who kind of questions on whether he could catch or not, but he's shown that he can actually be a good catcher. I don't think he's going to hit for any power, but he's going to spray line drives all over wherever they're playing. Really, we can't really project that too far forward. But I want to get more into the meat of this top 10 and everything like that. So we're going to take our first break here on Path to the Show. And up next, we'll be diving in through 10 through 6 of the Tampa Bay Rays farm system, breaking down the prospects. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Path to the Show keeps rolling all off-season. Tune into Bally Live and watch as we dissect every club's farm system and top prospects. From single to AAA, we've got you covered. Bally Live's MILB channel is where baseball's future lives. Visit ballylive.com or download the app today.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Path to the Show on Bally Live and Stadium. You're here with the Prospect Live guys. Reese is on your left. I am Drew on your right, and we're looking forward to talking about the top 10 prospects in the Tampa Bay Rays system. Where do you start with the top 10? None other than number 10. And number 10, Reese, a player I like a lot, a first-year player draft guy, an explosive young prepster, Theo Gillen. Can you give me a breakdown on Theo Gillen?
Yeah, Theo Gillen, he's looking like one of the better picks in the back end of the first round of like the MLB draft. He signed for above slot, $4.3 million. Shout out to Tyler Jennings for his amazing report on him. He's the one who writes most of our amazing draft reports and everything like that, and he headlines the draft coverage for us. Theo Gillen, he was drafted as a shortstop. I don't think he sticks there. And I think Tyler also tends to agree. He seems to think that he's going to probably move to the outfield where he can be a really good center fielder. He's really quick. He's really twitchy. And that sort of curtails itself or allows us to project that he might be an above average center fielder when all is said and done. And I think he's someone who he might be like a touch shy of the five tool potential, but there's still an ability to contribute in every facet of the game. Makes good swing decisions. He hits the ball hard. The question is, will there be enough loft to hit for home runs? But if he's spraying doubles around and backs into about, let's say, 20 to 22 home runs, he's going to be a regular for sure. He's going to project to be a good defensive center fielder. And with prospects this far away, it's all about projection. Like when we do our reports, we put a risk associated with them, and he has a high because it's just he's so far away from the major leagues. He's only played in a couple of single A games. But I want to know what your thoughts on Theo Gillen are.
I like Gillen quite a bit, just in terms of ranking him with his fellow classmates, so to say, in the draft. I most recently had Gillen at number 15 in the class, which, in a standard garden variety league is going to be a first round FYPD guy. And then the deeper you get, the better the selection he becomes. Even still, I think Gillen could theoretically be one of the top 5 to 10 in the class. He's just got everything you want. At this point, to be 18 and a prepster, the hit tool is there. The potential for power is there, as you alluded, with more loft. It's got to be a little bit more consistent lift in his swing to get to some of that power. But a good runner, it's, as Tyler said, finding this is a needle in a haystack, and the Rays have acquired it. I think any kind of thought of Gillen being a shortstop long term, might as well put that to bed right away. There, in the Rays system particularly, there will always be a better defender at short, and I think Gillen is a bat that you can put in the outfield and still a particularly valuable position at center field. I think he can cover center field. The arm, maybe, maybe not, but I think this is the type of profile the Rays tend to maximize as well. Uh, I really like Gillen a lot. He's been a top 150 guy for the team since he was drafted, Reese, and his spot at number 10, I think, is apt.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think he's someone who, in another organization, might get more run at shortstop, but we've seen historically the Rays value shortstop and second base defense more than most other organizations do. Because, I mean, that's, you need to have your double play like tandem locked down and be good and be able to work with each other. They're willing to sacrifice on the corners a little bit, but I think second base, shortstop, and maybe even center field, where I think he'll be good, sort of gives him that high floor if he can fit in there. And if not, I think he hits enough that he can play in a corner where we're not too bothered by him being in left field or right field.
No. The projection, as you alluded earlier, is there too, that even if he is kind of shifted to left or right, I think the power projection is there that he could still be theoretically a 2020 guy. I mean, I don't think that's outside the realm of possibilities at all. It's maybe even a likelihood if, the loft in his swing can be improved.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it ultimately his stolen base potential sort of comes down to where where are the Rays in the stealing base continuum? Like, do they give him the green light? He could steal 15 in his sleep, but it's do they allow him the 15? Do they allow it to go from 15 to 20 and 20 to 25? That's sort of up in the air. And speaking of up in the air, unless you have more thoughts on Theo Gillen, I want to talk about Braylor Guerrero, who definitely slots in right field. And this dude, he has crazy power. He has, I mean, we rated it as a 60 power, and he's in the complex. It's Braylor Guerrero. The thing about the Rays is that they don't normally hit that well at the top of the IFA class, but they do really well lower down. I mean, they've had some hits in the past, but it's a little bit for a team that's as good as them. It's a little bit more of a checkered history, but Braylor Guerrero is looking like one of the rare wins for them. He hit 324, 448, 461 in the complex league, showing off some power, showing off a little bit of speed. He's got a good arm. He sort of just fits in as a right fielder. Like, I feel like that's where he should just play, develop a little bit. And the swing decisions are a little bit up in the air. We don't know what they look like because we haven't seen it on tape as consistently because he hasn't played in single A. But I do think that he could be someone who, I mean, a 45 hitter with 60 power playing right field, there's a lot of value to that.
There sure is. I You said it. There's not enough video. We can't, quantify exactly what his swing decisions look like yet. And realistically, if we're gonna pick nits here, it's only at the complex thus far. I think even Class A ball would be appropriate to see how he's challenged. Just full season stateside ball, that's where you see pitchers more than throwers. And granted, there are pitchers in the complex level, as you and I both know. It's just more common to see guys that can really huck it and have control over what they're throwing. Yeah, stateside, A, high A, and especially when you get to double A, that's when you really face the test. But with Guerrero, you said it, power's the key here. He's ridiculously, ridiculously strong. 90th percentile exit velocity over 105 miles per hour, max exit up to 111 per some numbers from Matt in his report. Matt Thompson, shout out. Uh, Top 200, 225 prospect based on the hype alone. It's a good hit tool. Could theoretically be better. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what he actually does because again, 324 batting average, 448 on base in the complex looks real good. A lot of room to adjust, so to say, in a negative way, regress negatively. What's the phrase I'm looking for here? Regress to the mean.
Ooh, regress to the mean.
Yeah, there's enough wiggle room from 324, 448, 461 to regress in that way and still be a competent fantasy player, a valuable one at that.
Yeah, the big thing with Guerrero that we haven't touched on yet is he did have a shoulder injury in 2023 that required surgery, and he did get shut down in 2024 because of some lingering issues with the shoulder. And if that's the case, right field becomes a little bit harder to project because if he's having lingering shoulder issues, obviously you're not going to be able to get to your arm as well. So maybe he moves to left field, which puts a little bit more pressure on the bat. But ultimately, I think he'll be fine. He's a good 3 years away from being anything that we have to worry about like in fantasy, like especially like at the big league squad. So I think that there is time for that shoulder to get fully healthy and recover. I think ultimately he'll be fine, but I don't know if that sort of changes the calculus on him, so to say, since we're using a lot of math terms today.
I like it. I like the calculus. We need to keep that in the lexicon.
Do you want to transition over to our next guy, Braden Taylor?
I
Or do
think
you
we
want to keep going
should.
with Riley Guerrero?
No, I
Okay.
think Taylor has enough interest in terms of it was not the best year for him. And I know that in light conversations we've had about Braden Taylor, I think that I think I might be higher on him than you, but we both are aware of the fact that last season did not go as the Braden Taylor fans would have hoped.
No, things didn't seem to go. I mean, he started off really well. He hit really well in high A. He was 269, 389, 513, and people were like rejoicing. They're like, "Oh, this is another classic Rays victory, right?" They get him in the back end of the draft, and everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, this first rounder is looking really good." And then all of a sudden, he hits double A and he sort of hits a wall. And like you alluded to earlier, double A is the hardest place to hit because that the jump between high A and double A is the single highest jump in the minors because the level of stuff and the level of pitchability that double A pitchers tend to have really can expose some sort of flaws and swings. And Braden Taylor, he kind of wasn't hitting, pitches in the zone as well. He was really struggling with like sliders and stuff like that. And he ultimately, we don't know where he's going to play. Like, is he a third baseman? I don't think he's a shortstop, but I think he can play third base, second base, and those sort of profiles that you really have to hit at third and second base, especially with how I mean, for a fantasy perspective, you might want him to be a second baseman because of how terrible the position is right now, right? But
Right.
he's someone who he's going to have to hit, right? That's ultimately he's not at a premium position where he can get by on his club anymore.
That's true. You got to think about coming out of TCU, that's Power Five baseball in college. He really was kind of that hit over power type profile. And at least in the professional foray we've seen thus far, it's a little bit different. It's been a lot more power. And, you know, you consider strikeout rates over 25%, even up to more than 30%. It's interesting because still an above average power, uh, the hit tool, at least using our complete vision of what he could be good. I think Taylor could still be theoretically a 20 plus home run, 10-ish stolen base type at a difficult premium position defensively if he's at second base. I I think third base feels much more likely, and mm, I mm, I think third base is much more likely, Reese. Honestly, I
Do you
don't think that his defense is quality enough to be again over the shortstop that the Rays will prioritize over him defensively.
Yeah, do you think he's just the next Curtis Mead? Do
Ooh,
you think he where it's
I
sort of
loved
tough to figure out
Curtis
a spot
Mead.
for him to play? I love Curtis Mead as well as a fellow Australian. It kind of hurts me that he's not playing as much, but I wonder if that's sort of the way in which his prospect arc goes. We're all excited about him, and then it's kind of hard to fit him into the big league squad. Although he does have a better arm, Curtis Mead's big problem is that he doesn't have a good arm, right? And I don't think he has the infield
Sure.
actions for second base. Um,
I do think
but
Taylor
outside
has
of
the
that,
edge over Mead in that sense. Yeah.
yeah, he does
I
have
don't know.
he definitely is a good defender.
It's tricky. I don't like that question because it makes me sad. I love Curtis Mead, and I don't want. But it kind of comes back to the whole point that the Rays will oftentimes, whether it's a self-inflicted logjam with one-year vets or bizarre trades that to us are bizarre, to the Rays they're 5D chess, but I don't know. I think that what Taylor is right now, I've got him probably highest on the dynasty team at Prospects Live as well. Top 40 prospect for me because I think he turns it around, and I think that there's going to be enough marriage of hit and power to be relevant in that 2027 Rays lineup I was alluding to earlier. He is the starting third baseman there. I think he'll be okay. I think next year is a pivotal year for him, though. And if it turns more negative, he might be the next Curtis Mead, as you said.
I do think that next year is pivotal for him and where he slots in this organization. Speaking of this organization and everything like that, and prospects who are now starting to fit in, let's talk about Brody Hopkins a little bit. Brody Hopkins is someone that I saw over out here in California. He is about as athletic as I've seen a pitcher in a long time. The dude moves well. He's a former two-way guy from a D2 school in Winthrop, one of the better D2 programs out there. Shout out Winthrop. He is part of the return that the Rays got for Randy Arozarena. The big thing with him is it is a plus fastball and a plus slider, and then it's enough interesting other traits to profile as a starter right now. But I do think that there is a lot of reliever risk in this. It's a it's it's a fastball that gets like 95 to 97 with 15 inches of induced vertical break from a lower arm slot at that. And that allows it to play up. It's an 87 to 90-mile-per-hour slider that's really, really strong, like really, really good. Good against both righty and left-handed hitters. Sorry, he's got a below-average changeup, and the command sort of comes and goes. I put it as a 50. I don't know what your ultimate thoughts are on Brody Hopkins.
It's much of the same as yours. It's a great body for a starter, obviously. I think he could add muscle and still, his frame would be fine. I don't think that it would get bulky even at that point. But the key thing with Hopkins is going to be that he's got 2+ pitches. There's still plenty of time, development wise. Only touched high A, advanced, and I don't know. He is certainly a top 200 prospect. The hype for Hopkins, obviously, as you said earlier in the show, when the Rays get a prospect, who is it the Rays got? I love this for the Rays. And Hopkins is kind of a major benefactor of this, along with his trade mate, who we'll talk about in just a little bit. I think right now I'm projecting him as a starter fairly safely. And again, in the exercise that I'll bring up again and again, I actually gave Hopkins the nod as the fifth starter in 2027. I think his timeline, his Rule 5 timeline, and age kind of all play in towards that could be when he starts to get his shot. So I like Hopkins.
I like Hopkins as well. And let's go over to Trey Morgan, the last guy we're going to talk about in this little area. He is one of my favorites, contact first. I don't know if he plays first base, or I don't know if he plays first base for the Rays, because I think that he is being wasted there. Even though he is a great defensive first baseman, I would love to see him get more time in left field, right field. He's sort of like a Stephen Kwan, diet Stephen Kwan sort of prospect and everything like that. I like that sort
Wow.
of hit tool projection. The power might come. What are your thoughts on Trey Morgan?
Love the bizarre Stephen Kwan comp. I think that I would have never thought of that. He's not a first baseman, although the defense there is outstanding. I think you can pretty well extrapolate it to left field. Morgan is a fabulous hitter, one of the best hitters that I've seen in the last year. An incredible fielder, has power, has speed, but I do think that he is going to be a fantasy valuable player in the realm really of Stephen Kwan. That's again an incredible comp, so I like it a lot. He's going to stay in the lineup too, just because of the defense. I think Reese. I honestly would have considered bumping Morgan as well, but I guess that's the beauty of the top 10 because, dude, 5 more prospects better than Trey Morgan. He's one of our favorites.
Yeah. I can't say enough nice things about Trey Morgan. It's an interesting profile, but I love it. I love the sort of outlier sorts of guys like this. He's like if Evan White was good at baseball.
Woof. Okay. Well, while Evan White and his attorneys are reaching out to us, we're going to take a quick break and soothe all that over. And when we come back, we're going to be breaking down prospects 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 on Path to the Show on Bally Live and Stadium. We'll be right back.
Path to the Show keeps rolling all off-season. Tune into Bally Live and watch as we dissect every club's farm system and top prospects. From single to AAA, we've got you covered. Path to the Show keeps rolling all off-season. Tune into Bally Live and watch as we dissect every club's farm system and top prospects. From single to AAA, we've got you covered.
Welcome back to Path to the Show here on Valley Live and Stadium. We're the Prospects Live guys, and we're breaking down the top 10 prospects in the Tampa Bay Rays farm system. Now we're going to move on to sort of the more fun prospects. Not that 6 through 10 wasn't fun, but 5 through 1, in the top 10, you get to the more fun prospects and everything like that. Let's start off with one of the more fun prospects in all of the minor leagues. He stole 198 bases over the past 2 seasons, 104 last year. This dude cannot be stopped on the base paths. Let's talk about your favorite Simpson, my favorite Simpson, maybe after Homer. I don't know. Maybe you're a Homer or a Bart guy, but let's talk about Chandler Simpson. He is he is one of the most electric talents in minor league baseball. I think he hits enough. I think he fields enough. I think he runs, more than enough. This dude has every bit to be a big league regular.
Without a doubt. You know what opposing catchers say when they see Chandler Simpson running?
What do they say?
Dope! Obviously. You had to know that was coming. It's because Chandler Simpson has ridiculous wheels, man. It's 80 grade speed without a doubt. And the speed is not only illustrated on the base paths, which is fabulous. Like you said, 198 steals over 2 years is absolutely ridiculous. Super valuable tool. The thing with Simpson is he's also incredible in the field. Center field defense is great. I think that the reads are solid, but again, if I can quote you in your report, it's just the speed is otherworldly. It's like you amp up and you pay all of your points into a certain statistic in an RPG, but it works for Chandler Simpson. And I know that again in conversations you and I have had, the hit tool tremendous. I don't think we've seen a speed asset like Chandler Simpson since Billy Hamilton. This is pretty much a cheat code to win stolen bases in your leagues every week.
Yeah, he has the chance to just go crazy, like especially with the new rules and everything like that. I don't even want to put a ceiling on the stolen base upside with him. He's someone that I'm just like, I can't fathom how many bases he could steal if given. He's like Juan Pierre-ish, like in that sort of aspect. He's a 94% zone contact rate guy. He makes good swing decisions. The only question is does he have any sort of power? And he's only has 1 homer in his career, and it's an inside the Parker, which for someone with his speed, kind of shocking that especially at the lower levels, he wasn't able to put up a couple more inside the park home runs. But you don't steal 90 stolen bases in a season by accident. And Chandler Simpson, he is just like the need for speed. He is just everything that you want. Like if you're just looking for a slap and dash sort of profile guy, especially because he can play a really good defensive center field. I don't know what more to say on Chandler Simpson. I'm just enthralled with the profile. I almost thought about making him an above average regular when we had wrote his report, but I settled on like a regular at that. But I think there's upside for a lot here.
I would have probably pushed for you to go above average. And I have to shout out my brother, Kyle Wheeler. He told me earlier this season that I was missing Chandler Simpson, and upon digging in, I sure was. So credit to Kyle. I think this is a leadoff guy for the next 6-7 years at minimum. I think Simpson is a fantasy valuable player who, again, a cheat code in one category, but not a dud in any really other than power. And power's pretty abundant nowadays. So I think you can find that
Yeah,
elsewhere.
Power is something, it's easy to find power these days. It's hard to find speed. Let's transition over to Aiden Smith. He's also a burner, not as much of a burner as Chandler Simpson, who I would like to see him go against, some of the fastest athletes we've seen. Would I like to see him race Tyreek Hill? Yes, I would. I would like to see him go faster. But Aiden Smith, he was a fourth round pick for the Mariners in 2023. He ended up getting traded. He was the other part of the Randy Arozarena trade. He's just optimized swing, how much power does he get to is the ultimate question. Is he a 20 to 25 guy? Is he a 25 to 28 home run guy? I think that's sort of up in the air. But what's not up in the air is this dude makes fantastic swing decisions. He barrels the crap out of the ball. It just, is it a hard line drive or is it a towering moonshot? I think that is more hard line drives right now, but that doesn't mean that he can't unlock more power. He's a good enough defensive center fielder, but I think he moves over to right or left field. He has a good arm. He's a plus runner. He's someone who he was one of the more underrated prospects. Then after I went and saw him, I feel like, not to toot my own horn, but I think the helium on him went a little bit higher right after I saw him. So he's someone who probably won't debut until 2027, but he's someone who I'm a big fan of. I think he's one of my favorite prospects I saw this past season.
Reese, ever the influencer, you're not giving yourself enough credit. Obviously, the helium is probably 20 or 25% associated with your eyes being on him. And, since he was drafted, especially since the trade to Tampa, fantasy eyes have been hot glued over and repeatedly stapled, drilled to Aiden Smith. They can't get off the guy. He's one of the biggest risers in kind of the fantasy baseball zeitgeist over the last year, with prospects considered, of course. He looks like he can contribute across the board. I think that safely, you could say more balls lifted in the air would be a benefit because that's just more home runs. But again, maybe we're just being selfish fantasy players and saying everybody must be 2020. We have to get 2020 out of everyone or they're useless. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Aiden Smith looks like he can be a quality major league dude right now. Of course, seeing how he contends with Double-A pitching, as we've said, is going to be the big key. But considering, I think Smith is one of the best prospects in this system, probably the number one guy, number two guy as soon as next year.
Yeah, he definitely has that sort of upside. Like he could, I mean, Xavier Isaac and Carson Williams, who we're going to talk about later, could debut and fall off this list because of graduation. They're not going to fall off
Right.
because of performance or anything like that. They're too talented to do that. But Smith could definitely be the number one prospect in this farm system this time next year. I don't know. It's ultimately he's got a lot of things going right for him. I think he's a great contact guy with power that's emerging. And how much does he want to sell off the contact for the power is ultimately the question. And that's a hard question for some of these guys to have. I mean, could Adam Eaton have hit for more home runs? Yes, but Adam Eaton also was a really good, just line drive hitter, and then allowed the speed to play up, and he was a good like corner outfielder. Sort of the comp I have for him. Aiden Smith is a little bit more. He's a juiced up Adam Eaton, and Adam Eaton was good for a couple of years too. So, do you want to go over to who I know you and I want to talk about quite a bit, or do you want to? Have you said all you want to do about Aiden Smith?
I love Aiden Smith, but in terms of prospects, I love Santiago Suarez is way above. I love Suarez. Looking at him, you see a guy who throws has a 21% strikeout minus walk rate last year in 2024 as a teenager in Class A. Santiago Suarez is a monster. Could be even better. I'm really excited to hear your breakdown on him because this is a dude I'm all over in fantasy.
He has elite command. Like 60 is what we have on our report over at Prospects Live. I think that might be a little bit conservative in the end. This dude, he only walked 21 batters in 23 starts. He had one hit by pitch. That's pretty crazy. The fact that he's able to control his stuff that well. The fact is that he could also unlock more strikeouts too by being less in the zone and walking an extra batter. He gets guys to chase with the fastball, which is really, really good. 94 to 96. He has a really, really good cutter. He has a really good curveball. The curveball is one of my favorite pitches in all the minor leagues, 78 to 83, and that thing just moves. It's got a little bit of horizontal tilt to it. It's really good. He's got a good changeup. He moves his stuff all around the zone. Can you believe that they got him for Xavier Edwards? That's pretty bonkers to me.
Yeah, I you know where my brain goes to when I hear Xavier Edwards. This is a family show. I'm not going to go there. But again, yeah, Santiago Suarez, what a fleecing. We say that a lot for the Rays,
That's,
though, don't we? No disrespect to
we
Xavier
do that.
Edwards either.
They have, and Xavier Edwards is going to be a good major leaguer. I don't think he's a starter, but I think he's a good off the bench sort of guy who can play a few different positions.
He
Other
made
people
it
seem
further
to
in the majors than
agree on
me.
that. Exactly. He's made it farther in baseball than I ever will. So
Yeah,
he's
same.
shout out to Xavier Edwards, but Santiago Suarez, the fact that they were able to get such a low level, like they got him when he was in the Dominican Summer League, and he's just sort of taken off just in this organization. They've optimized him. It's a little bit less room on the frame than your average pitcher this at this age in their development, but ultimately, if with this sort of command, it doesn't really matter. The stuff's already good enough as it is. He's just I feel like if everything goes right, the worst case scenario is for him to be a 3 starter. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's too aggressive. I mean,
absolutely.
there is no such thing as a pitching prospect, right? Like, it's hard. I know you and I are the big pitching prospect guys, but there
Yeah,
is a lot of minefields that pitching prospects have to navigate through on their way up to
sure.
the majors.
Yeah,
Like, we would have
absolutely.
thought
There are
Sixto
tons of
Sanchez would have
minefields
won
for
multiple Cy Youngs by now.
Ugh, I can't think about that one. That one's gonna hurt my heart too much, Reese. But with Suarez,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Santiago Suarez is SS and Sixto Sanchez is SS. Reese, if you just curse this guy, then I'm gonna point back to this point in time forever. You better not have. Santiago
I
Suarez,
hope
I'll
not.
tell you this in terms of just how in on him that I am. Suarez, I have at my 44th prospect overall, Reese. Am I losing it? Is that too high?
I don't I don't think you're losing it. You also do tend to, compared to consensus, you do tend to be a little bit more aggressive on pitchers and catchers. And he
Yeah.
is, if all the minor league pitchers, of all of them below double A, he's probably like a top 3 pitching prospect that hasn't pitched in double A yet. Like you've got Harlan Susana, Travis Sikora, who we'll talk about in later episodes, Santiago Suarez. He's in that conversation for sure. He is one of the most complete pitching prospects at this age of his development. Like, we can argue, like, should he walk a little bit more? Should he be less in the zone? But ultimately, if that's the sort of thing we're arguing about, maybe we should be a little bit more aggressive on him. And I think that he kind of is probably a top 50 prospect in my mind in a real life list. So maybe you bump him down a little bit, top 65 on a fantasy list, because you obviously bump up hitters because of the relative safety. Although, as we know, hitting prospects aren't safe. Like when people say that,
No.
there's just less risk. They're all, or there's less, I don't know. There's less variance, maybe. There is still this equal amount of
I like
risk,
that.
but yeah. So
No, I think you're right.
Suarez is. I think that there's a chance that this dude is a 2, maybe puts up SP1 seasons, but I think we hedge perfectly with a 55.
I do too. I think even a low end one. In fantasy perspective, there's always going to be guys who have grosser stuff who can, rack up more strikeouts. But in terms of ratios, in terms of providing something kind of across the board, honestly, the name that kind of jumps out at me is, and this is not from a pitch mix perspective, it's just kind of the upside I see. Maybe something like Sandy Alcantara for fantasy. And it's a player I want again every single part of. If he's in a league, I need him. Trade him to me. That's who you need to trade him to.
Alcantara is actually a really good comp because he's showing Santiago Suarez is at this point that he has an innings eater sort of. I mean, 111 innings at this age. I mean, it can only get better. Obviously, there's injuries and stuff that can happen. But
Yep.
if he can just be, he won't strike out 12 per 9, but he'll strike out a batter an inning, and he'll keep the ratios in a usable spot. I actually really like that comp. If there's
Broken clock is right twice a
you
day, Reese.
Exactly. Speaking about broken clock right twice a day, I mean, sort of, there are people who are less in on Xavier Isaac than us. There are some publications that are talking about him not being able to hit. And I think that our report over at Prospects Live Patreon does kind of acknowledge that. Xavier Isaac is is in our mind the second best prospect in the Rays system. But he's got crazy power. He's shown feel for hitting that I think there was some injury and some other stuff that was in the background for Xavier Isaac for the reason that he was down. But we're talking about one of the most physically imposing. He's one of those, if he played SEC football, he'd be the guy you'd want first off the bus. Like, he is big, he is physical, he is strong. He's actually getting more athletic as he kind of fine tunes his body, where he's getting some reverse projection, is what we call it. He's got power. I don't think he's been playing in the left field a little bit in the Arizona Fall League and everything like that. That's not where he's going to play. He's going to be hitting first base, or he's going to be hitting DH, and it doesn't matter. This dude's going to be hitting the middle of your fantasy lineups and everything like that for years to come. I think that there is some concern about where the contact went, but I think this next season he'll show that he is every bit the hitter that we thought he was going into 2024.
I have faith in it for sure. And, anytime I think of Xavier Isaac, I have to apologize. Xavier, I'm really sorry. I really had a lot of doubts about Xavier Isaac, that he just probably wouldn't. I didn't think he would adjust well to professional ball, but I am and was incredibly wrong. And I've got to shout out my boy, Greg Hoogkamp, our fantasy lead, who comped Xavier Isaac's upside to that of Ryan Howard, one of my favorite players in baseball. 50 home run seasons, maybe. I'm really excited about Xavier Isaac, and I think that he is a stellar prospect, a top 40 guy in fantasy in my book. And so, if you take my word for it, Isaac's pretty valuable.
Where do you view Carson Williams? Because Carson Williams is a
Mm.
very divisive prospect in his own right. I wrote in his report that I wrote, he has some Javi bias as swings to him. The swing decisions are aggressive, to put it nicely. Sometimes comically out of control, but he can really play shortstop. He has a good arm. I saw him in high school. This dude was on the mound. He was touching like 98 miles per hour. The dude has that sort of arm to him. He's a good fielder. He's got crazy power, like we've seen in the past. Like he can just hit some absolute moonshots. I've heard some call him a jitterbug. This dude is one of the more electric athletes in minor league baseball. He's going to stay at shortstop. He could contend for Gold Gloves. It just, does he hit enough? And can he be like Javi Baez in that he can be electric? He can be a social media darling. For the first little bit of his career, then if things start to slow down, then we have to really reevaluate where we go with him. He's definitely got that sort of upside. I don't know what you think about it.
I'm with you entirely. I think that Williams' trajectory, since I've heard you say he could be Javi Baez, their trajectory lines up perfectly for me in terms that he could be a web gem staple, he could be a power speed threat, but really the hit tool is going to be the major turning point onto whether or not he's hyper valuable long term. Even if he's not let's say he's a 230 hitter that does 2020. Fantasy teams are going to have that every year. In the era of three true outcome baseball, I think it's okay that he can be a bit strikeout prone. And I think that, I mean, he might even flirt with like more than 30% strikeout rates in his pro career. I don't think I'm out of the question saying that, but even still, we lined up perfectly because Williams is my number one Ray in fantasy prospects, my number 24 overall. So I'm with you guys here.
Yeah, he's someone who, if he hits 250, he's a down ballot Hall of Fame, or not Hall of Fame, MVP sort of candidate. Like Hall of
Right.
Fame's getting way too ahead of ourselves. That's not what we're trying to do. We're doing pass of the show, not pass of
No,
the
not
hall
quite.
here. To basically Williams, if he hits 250, this guy can be, he can be your, I don't know, he could be a fantasy star if he hits 250.
Oh,
But
yeah.
basically, we're going to take our final break here on Path of the Show, not Path of the Hall. But after the break, we're going to make our predictions for which prospects could have the biggest impact on the Rays in the future. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Path to the Show keeps rolling all off season. Tune into Bally Live and watch as we dissect every club's farm system and top prospects. From single to AAA, we've got you covered. Visit prospectslive.com for top prospects rankings, video, scouting reports, and live action write-ups. Join their Patreon and get exclusive insights to dominate your fantasy league.
Welcome back to Path to the Show on Bally Live and Stadium. And you have unfortunately just missed us breaking down the top 10 prospects in the Tampa Bay Rays system. We, of course, being the Prospect Live guys. Drew Wheeler here on your right. Reese White is right over there on your left. And Reese, the Tampa Bay Rays system, as we said at the jump, is always loaded with talent. And this year is really no different. Real quick, Reese, will you run us through the top 10? Going 10 to 1?
Okay, 10 to 1. We are going to go with Theo Gillen, Braylor Guerrero at 9, Braden Taylor, pitcher Brody Hopkins, first baseman Trey Morgan, Chandler Simpson is our number 5 prospect, Aiden Smith 4, Santiago Suarez, the second pitcher on this list, Xavier Isaac, and the number 1 Rays prospect is Carson Williams.
It's a great top 10. I mean, I think really every one of those guys is theoretically a top 225-ish, if not top 200 prospect in fantasy. So it's an incredibly deep system, which is nothing, again, nothing out of the ordinary for the Rays. And as I've alluded to, many of these guys, Isaac, Morgan, Williams, Simpson, Taylor, are all going to be dudes who I projected at least to be major league contributors by 2027 at the latest. So, Reese, let's talk really quick about the player you think who is most in line for promotion to the MLB next season? Who's the most likely?
I think it's either Carson Williams or Chandler Simpson. I'm gonna go with Chandler Simpson. I just think the speed, they can't keep him off that roster for too long. It's good. It's a good glove. It's good contact. I think he's definitely got everything it takes to kind of be. I don't think he hits leadoff in the beginning. Maybe he's that like 9. We always hear about old school managers, especially in the National League. They love to put the pitcher 8, and then they love to have a second leadoff hitter 9. That seems to be where he'll break in, cut his teeth in the major leagues, and then he'll step in. He'll kind of wrap around and become the leadoff hitter of the future for them.
I love it. I'm the old school manager you're discussing. That would be what I would do. In terms of who's going to be promoted next season, I think the obvious answer is Carson Williams. I think we could discuss whether or not he breaks camp. I'm going to say it's 40% likely that he does. I think it's more likely that he's Reese. What do you think? Like a Super Two type guy? Even with the prospect
Yeah,
promotion
he's
stuff, I don't think the Rays are going to rush him.
No, I think his contact skills just give them enough of a quote excuse to allow him to figure out in AAA for a little bit. And if he hits
Yeah.
well in AAA, maybe he forces his way onto this roster. But this is a team that's shown costs are very important to them. They're very money conscious is the nice way to put it. So I think he's in line for a promotion at some point, barring some sort of disaster happening. But he I don't think he breaks camp with the team now.
Yeah, it would take some sort of absolute disaster for him not to make the majors next year. But Reese, looking past next year to the end of the line for these dudes over the course of their career, who do you have the most faith in that we've talked about today?
Oh, that's a great question. I have the most faith in Chandler Simpson, but I've talked about him enough. So another prospect that I have a lot of faith in is Santiago Suarez. At this point in his prospect development, he has hit every single checkpoint. Like if we were putting out a Twitter like thing, we'd have the green check emoji on all of his stuff. Good command, good stuff. He shows the ability to eat innings. He's shown everything that we want. It's just can he keep doing that? And I think he can. He's got the workhorse frame. He's got good stuff. He's got command. He's got everything, like I said, that we want from a pitching prospect at this point in their development. That he just needs to stay healthy, which is easier said than done. Don't get me wrong, especially with pitching being maybe of all the professional sports here in the United States, pitching is one of the things that athletes who get injured the most because it's just an unnatural motion on your body. But I think Santiago Suarez has shown everything that I sort of want, and I don't know if you agree. I know we're both big pitching guys, but he's definitely the guy for me.
I In my head I had Suarez, but just again, since we've talked about him, I'll throw out some love for Xavier Isaac. I think that he's a player who could, again, if his career lines up with Ryan Howard's, even if he's 88% of what Ryan Howard delivered, that's likely an MVP as Howard did. That's likely 45 home run ish seasons. I think the contact is better than what we've seen. I think the power is very real. And I think that even the Rays platooning and log jamming and nonsensical things that they tend to do, I think that even the Rays will say, oh boy, Xavier Isaac is a large, imposing, classic first base type. Let's give him the reins and let's see what he can do. And I'll tell you, man, one of the best BPs that I've ever seen in my life, Xavier Isaac. I think he might have legitimately evaporated a baseball at one point this summer.
He
So
he has that sort of power, and the Rays, to their credit, if a prospect or a player, sorry, shows that they are good enough, they will not platoon him. I mean, Yandy Diaz plays every day, basically, right? Like, and
yeah,
although he might not be a Ray for much longer, that's sort of the upside we're hoping with someone like Xavier Isaac. And if he can hit enough, I think that they'll find ways to do their platoons and everything in other sorts of ways.
absolutely. Well, guys, that is pretty much it for us. We hope you've had a wonderful time with us on Path to the Show. Reese, very quickly tell the folks where they can find you on social media between episodes.
You can find me on Twitter at Reese B White or X, and then you can find me on Blue Sky, sort of Reese White. That's where you can find me. That's one of the two social medias I tend to use.
Likewise, with me on the Twitter machine at Drew is okay. And then you can also find me on Blue Sky, the same thing, Drew is okay. Love to interact with you guys there. And of course, it's been our treat and our pleasure to interact with you all off season long. It's going to keep rolling on just like Path to the Show here on Bally Live and Stadium. And in our next episode, we're going to be talking about the Baltimore Orioles. What's cooking in Birdland? We're going to find out very, very soon. Reese, thank you so much for your help, and thanks for joining us today on the show. We will catch you later and see you next time on Path to the Show.
Path to the Show keeps rolling all off-season. Tune into Bally Live and watch as we dissect every club's farm system and top prospects. From single to AAA, we've got you covered.